What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Uncanny J-Men. Today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of Moon Knight. So if you have not yet seen episode 2, be warned, we will have spoilers for that episode today. We are your hosts. I'm Josh.
I'm JADe.
And here we go.
Avengers! Assemble.
So JADe, what did you think of episode 2?
I liked it. I feel like less to talk about in total, although granted, last time we did a 30-minute recap of what's going on, talked about it. We then after that immediately talked for maybe another like half hour. So even if there's less, I feel like there's to talk about. We still have plenty to talk about in this one.
Definitely. Any particular topic you want to start off, or shall I kick it off?
Yeah, so I have notes, a lot of notes from the episode. I might just kind of run through what the first thing that showed up for me to talk about from the episode. One of the very first things we see. So when Steven gets back to the museum and he sees the security guard and he's like, dude, this is gonna blow your mind. Let's take a look at this video. And the jackal that was chasing him never shows up. We also see later in the episode that Layla also can't see the jackal. It's not just a computer thing. It's a not having the ability to even see the creature. So Steven, Mark, the Moon Knight character, and we have to assume Arthur as well, because he's the one who actually summons the jackal, although haven't actually seen him interact with it. But it feels like the jackal or any of those mythical kind of creatures, if any others show up, you have to have like an attunement to the ancient Egyptian like vision in order to even see them in the first place.
Right. So most likely you have to be an avatar, have that connection to the Egyptian deities. But it is very interesting that even Steven, when he was looking at the monitors, didn't see it on there. So even he can't see them if it's a video camera recording it. He has to be able to see them directly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's very interesting that would be the case, even with the mystical vision, that he still couldn't see him. I mean, it makes it easier to explain. I mean, you could always have had it showed up and then the security guard doesn't see it, but it's like a nice little effect to like, he was confused by it too.
Right. And when they were getting ready and he's like, oh, this is going to blow your mind. It's Area 51 type stuff. With the buildup, there's going to be nothing there. But I was expecting it to be doctored. I was expecting that Mark Spector had come back at some point and adjusted the footage, and that's part of what he does, is just he changes things, he covers his tracks. So I was expecting that to be the reason. So it did catch me by surprise when it was just, this simply cannot be seen by.
It makes the job easier for Mark. He doesn't have to go do that. He just knows it's going to be fixed.
Exactly. I would have been curious to see in the storage room because that's one location where we do see that that Egyptian hellhound type creature climbing on the ceiling. Things are falling off as it's trying to climb on the ceiling. So it is impacting the world around it. We didn't get to see the footage there. So the only things we saw being impacted was what Steven himself had interacted with. So I am kind of curious. And even that fight at the end, and I know I'm jumping around, but the fight with the creature at the end, the changes we see to the environment around is when Mark is thrown through a window, when Steven is thrown through a window, or when the car crashes, it crashes into both of them. The creature pushes Steven into cars. I want to go back and watch to see if there's something that the creature does.
So when I watched it again, I watched it. Basically, what I've been doing is at least watch it twice before we discuss. First time, I just watch it for fun. Second time, I watch it with subtitles on and take notes, just because sometimes there's things in subtitles that show up that I didn't realize that's what they said, or it sounded different. But one thing I noticed watching it the second time through, during that fight, Moon Knight, once he's turned into like the Moon Knight, not Mr. Knight, the not suited character, but like the really like wrapped up Egyptian one, he steps on a car window, it cracks, then another crack shows up when the jackal steps on it. So the jackal is still affecting the environment, but it may be a lot easier not to notice that, especially because in the museum, the jackal was climbing on the ceiling during a lot of that. And so there's not going to be some scratches, but there wasn't a lot of like knocking stuff over until it got to the bathroom where there's no cameras.
Right. That makes sense. And all the cameras would be aimed down, and that's where Steven was the one knocking things over on purpose to try and slow it down. And you're right, it actually makes sense because in that final fight, when they have it from Layla's point of view, where we can't see the jackal, she does throw a bottle. It gets the head wet, and so she's able to see that water. So that is true. So it clearly does have an impact.
It's very.
But it's interesting that didn't show any of that in the from that initial footage.
It's very like Invisible Man or Hollow Man, like one of those where it's like throw paint on them or put them in a steamy room and you can then see them. It's like so they're invisible, but they still have matter. So it's not like a energy being or anything like that. So that was interesting.
Okay, and part of the reason I was curious about that is at the end when the door is busted open and Steven is pointing saying jackal, jackal. Well, it's at the doorway and it's kicking up dust, but then Layla doesn't see the dust. So it could just be different point of views. You have to know it's there maybe to even recognize the impact it's having. I don't know. We'll see if they address any of that down the road.
So one thing I have written down because I decided to go ahead and do this is when they get to the storage lockers, the storage locker has the number 43 and then a QR code. I scan the QR code.
Oh, nice.
I scan the QR code and I just want to let everyone who watches this know, if you go in, scan that same QR code, you get a free Moon Knight comic from Marvel Unlimited. So you get a Moon Knight comic and it looks like it's a weekly thing. So there may actually have been I'm wondering if there's a QR code in the first episode we missed. And every week you find the QR code to get a different comic. I think that'd be really cool. I just wanted to point that out. Doesn't have to do with the plot, but it's a really cool feature that they put in there.
Well, I'm grateful you caught that too. I didn't recognize that, so I'm gonna have to go back and find those QR codes as well.
Yep.
Anything for free comics, I'm all for that.
Yeah, get a good digital comic just to get more familiarized with the Moon Knight character.
There you go. So one thing I want to now harken back to, you mentioned about Mr. Knight. For me, that is that was the big cheer moment of this episode, was when he showed up. For those who don't know, we mentioned in the last episode that there are 5 primary personalities to Mark Spector. We have Mark Spector, who's the mercenary in here that we've seen. We have Stephen Grant. We know him well. We have Moon Knight, which the show is kind of showing that Moon Knight is essentially Mark Spector in the suit. Mm-hmm. We have Mr. Knight, and we have Jake Lockley. Now, we haven't seen Jake Lockley yet. I'll get to him in a little bit. But to this point, we hadn't seen Mr. Knight up until he showed up halfway through this episode. And I loved it because it kind of showed Mr. Knight apparently is just Stephen Grant's version of the suit. I'll be curious to see if this is just when he uses the suit, if he becomes Mr. Knight, or if this was just a one-time kind of a joke thing that he didn't know what the suit looked like. So this is what he conjured up. But I love that. I thought it was fantastic.
I am fully expecting to see next time I go to a convention or anything. That's a pretty easy outfit to create. Yeah. Just go out, buy a white suit, white tie, white everything, and then just make a mask, which you can just probably easily make through a little bit of knitting, a little bit of sewing, and getting one of those white, like, I forget what they're called, but those like full body suit, like you see like green screen people and stuff like that. I expect to see a bunch of these Mr. Knight costumes in the future.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd be disappointed if I didn't at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out, if we're going to go ahead and continue talking about Mr. Knight, is
sure,
Steven couldn't pull Mr. Knight, or like couldn't pull a suit out, like he couldn't summon the suit essentially. Mm-hmm. As he was falling, trying to summon the suit, it was after he slammed his head on a pipe that the suit basically showed up and he did like a superhero landing. One thing I thought was interesting is because it's like he hit his head, but what it feels like is that Khonshu, the Egyptian god that he's the avatar for, and the suit like naturally just protects the owner. So it might not have been Steven really like somehow summoning that suit and he'll be able to do it in the future. I'm thinking it's just almost like an innate ability that like if you're about to die, because that fall and getting your head hit that hard would probably kill a normal person, the suit basically showed up to protect them.
Okay, so in a similar vein to like the Hulk protects Bruce Banner.
Exactly.
Even if he doesn't want the Hulk to appear, the Hulk will appear to protect him in times of need. Most of the time. But yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't picked up on that, but you're right. Yeah, he is Stephen Grant when he bumps into that thing on the way down, and then he lands in the funny superhero pose as Mr. Knight.
Yep.
So with all of that, now we have 4 out of the 5 primary personalities. So we're just missing Jake Lockley. And I do think there's more evidence in this episode that Jake is there. One thing, the biggest thing for me, we now know Mark Spector is married. And we also can very much tell that he cares very deeply for his wife. So if he didn't ask out the woman in episode 1, and we know Steven didn't ask out the woman in episode 1, and we're pretty sure Moon Knight and Mr. Knight did not, because that would have been very noticeable for her. She would have said something. So who did? Who did ask her out? I think that really just leaves Jake Lockley somewhere hidden underneath.
Yep. And they still continue to do the imagery of 3s. They continue to do that. So I think it's coming, whether it's at the end of this season, or I don't know if there's really enough time to introduce the character. I mean, we're a third of the way through the entire season at this point, 2 episodes in.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot to go still for a plot. So I'm not sure if a Jake could really show up until maybe like an after credit scene or something to like start leading into like, oh, this might matter in the next season.
Yeah. Could be a twist in the last episode, or that he's secretly had his hand in a whole bunch of different things, bring it together. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that ends up playing out.
Definitely. One interesting thing that they say, Steven says in the episode, in about like the multiple personalities, is after he's like, when he basically charges out of the storage locker container thing, he says, I'm going to turn in all of this illegal materials. They're going to arrest me. Hopefully they throw me in a hospital and fill me with pills so that you don't come out again. Very interesting that he says that, because that happens, I think, multiple times, but at least one big time for a really good story arc in the comics where he's in a mental hospital being drugged. And actually what's interesting is that Billy and Bobby, who show up in this episode as the 2 cops, are his like mental health people that they kind of abuse him and all this other stuff, that they work for Ammit. And they showed up in this. So as soon as like one cop turned to the other cop and was like, so Bobby, because they like always say each other's names in the comic. So it was like, as soon as they said it, I was like, oh no, these aren't cops. Like you could probably tell earlier on as well.
Yeah.
But it's like just having that, I was like, oh, it's these 2 like minor characters, but it's like a cool nod again to the comics. But kind of leads into, I think it would be a great starting point for the next one of him showing up in an insane asylum that's actually being run by another Egyptian god, or something along those lines, because that is something they keep on making it seem like he really is somewhere between insane and not insane.
Yeah. I definitely think they're going to have some point this season him ending up in some sort of mental hospital or some situation like that. And they had the tie-in when he was talking with the HR representative for the museum.
Yep.
I found the interaction so incredibly sketchy, suspicious. It's just a very suspicious interaction, because like, what type of a museum has a long-standing relationship with psychiatric doctors? That's a weird comment to make. I feel like, to me, I'm going to guess that that HR representative has some connection to probably Ammit, maybe Khonshu, but is enthralled in this, or is a part of this whole situation. I don't think him wanting to get Stephen Grant help is just him noticing that this guy has a mental health issue and is legitimately trying to help him. I definitely think this is that he's involved in this. And asking about stolen property.
That's true.
I mean, he's looking for something. He was looking for something out of Steven. He wanted to see, what do you have on you? Is there anything, like, can I get any information from you on something you might have taken? So I think that guy is definitely a part of probably Ammit.
It's possible that we might have Ammit be the villain, essentially, the behind the scenes villain, multiple seasons. It might not just be we beat Ammit at the end of the season. It might just be beat Arthur, and then it just keeps showing up.
Yeah. I mean, I doubt he's gonna defeat Ammit in such a way that like Ammit's gone. That's not really how you deal with this level of a villain.
Mm-hmm.
I think Arthur Harrow, yeah, Arthur Harrow right now is the key to unleashing Ammit. So that's the villain that they're going to have to be taking down. I agree with that, definitely.
And also talking about villains, this is the first time, very close to the end of the episode, actually, that we see Arthur do something that's just definitely evil. Instead of it's like, yeah, this kind of looks like a cult. It's kind of weird. He did kill someone, but like the scales said they were a bad person, so you might be able to excuse that. But this is the first time we see him just kill a random homeless person because he picked up a scarab. It was just like, sorry, you're not going to see heaven on earth, and kills him.
Yep. He never checked the scales. He didn't even ask Ammit for guidance. He just straight up murdered this guy.
And like, we know he's a bad guy, but like, this is the first time we see like an actual truly bad act that isn't just like furthering it's like showing he's actually a bad guy. He's not like following Ammit's bad. It's showing he is a bad person.
And I wonder if that's part of his whole devotion, is that he knows the scales would not be balanced in his favor. He knows what he said. He used to be the avatar for Khonshu.
Yeah.
Which means he's gone around, he's beaten people up, probably killed a lot of people. And now he's doing these things, but we still see a little bit of that person who's willing to just kill people. So I think he knows his heart is heavy, is heavier than that feather. He's not going to weigh himself, and he is trying to find another way. He knows he's not going to balance the scales, but is probably trying to unleash Ammit in the hopes that that will be enough to let him in anyway.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting talking about the avatars of Khonshu. So he was one, is still alive. So he was either his deal with Khonshu was over, or Khonshu decided to end that deal. And it could be, I mean, Khonshu talks about righting justice, being like a fighter for good, and everything is like punishing those who are protecting those who need it and punishing those who do harm to those in need. If Arthur just likes to kill, that would make an avatar that is helpful for Khonshu, but eventually isn't what Khonshu wants and could basically abandon him, leading to Mark being the one who gets to be the next avatar, and then Mark protecting Layla in some ways, because Khonshu is basically threatening or blackmailing Mark, saying that Layla will become the next avatar if you leave.
Yeah.
So I mean, those could be hollow words. He's just saying that to keep Mark because he knows Mark is a great avatar, or Layla might be a good avatar in the future, and he's like, yeah, no, she's a next candidate. I'm going to go for her.
And I definitely want to talk about Layla and her connection to Khonshu, because I wonder if there's already something there between Layla and Khonshu. So there's a couple of things that I'm looking at here. For one thing, how does Khonshu know that the scarab is with Arthur Harrow at the end? The only people who witnessed that is Arthur Harrow, Layla, and the guy that got killed. They were the only ones around when that happened. And immediately Khonshu was aware that Arthur Harrow had this. Now, maybe there's some degree of omnipotence to him and that he can see things elsewhere, but I think there's a chance that he knows because Layla knows, that maybe she was already connected to him in some way. And in the comics, I know that the way Mark Spector gains his Moon Knight abilities is he's taken out by the Bushman, and so followers of Khonshu bring him and put him at the base of the statue, or people who are involved with that. I'm wondering if Layla had a hand there. Maybe she was already a follower of Khonshu, and maybe like I'm wondering if Layla is, as we mentioned before, connected to Marlene from the comics.
Right.
So Marlene being the daughter of one of the archaeologists who gets killed by a group of mercenaries that Mark had been a part of, but then he turns on those mercenaries when he sees what they're doing to the archaeologists. which we can talk about that came up in this episode too.
Yep.
But I'm thinking that if she has that Marlene type role where her father was one of the archaeologists who got killed in this, and maybe she either witnessed or discovered that Mark had turned on the mercenaries, then maybe in his weakened state knows he's about to die, brings her to the statue. She could have been the one to bring Mark to the statue. That could be where their link actually started, is that she is already a follower of Khonshu. And can I help? That's how she knows all the suit, how she knows about all this. They got married.
Yep.
So we know that happened.
I mean, we know that she knows Egyptian hieroglyphs and can read it and everything. And one thing I actually found interesting, so Steven, this kind of goes back to us, we talked about previously about who's the primary, who's the original body owner, and then the other personalities came out. Steven shares so many commonalities with Layla that it's, and also Mark has a lot longer history of like, he had to have been trained, be in the military, became a mercenary, did all these different things. Got married, so he knew someone long enough, and the person doesn't know who Steven is. Therefore, Mark has to, in my book, Mark is the primary. He was the only Mark, the only personality, and Steven eventually surfaced or became like in reality, and was based so much on what he missed about Layla, or the influence Layla had, because the same poem or poet that they both love, and they're like, oh, it's my favorite. They both know French, know Egyptian hieroglyphics. There were so many similarities between the two that it feels like Steven was basically created as a Layla, not substitute, but with that influence.
And we mentioned in the last discussion last week that there's a possibility that Steven was created as that second personality to be the man that Mark wants to be. And there's more evidence right here. Mark loves his wife, but thinks he's too dangerous for her. And so he tries to protect her by seeking a divorce. Well, Steven is the perfect man for Layla. In the eyes of Mark, shares the same poet, learns French, which she loves, learns Egyptian hieroglyphics. He has the same passions that she had. The difference is he creates Steven to be, or Steven is created in some way to be safe and cautious and not seeking excitement and battle. So in the eyes of Mark Spector, Stephen Grant would be the perfect alternative for Layla, who he deeply cares about.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think it's very interesting, that whole thing. And also I'll say the poem, I looked up the poem, and it's about being without your true love, basically like having love and not being to be able to be with them. Very relational to exactly what's happening with Mark and her, and protecting her but not being able to be with her and everything. So I think that's very interesting as well. One final thing that I did want to talk about is at the very end, because we're getting pretty close to hitting around a half hour. I want to try to keep this short and sweet for you guys. But one thing I really want to talk about at the end, we see, so Arthur gets a scarab. Khonshu says, I'll take you to where he's going. So we see Mark wake up, or not wake up, but in a hotel room drinking heavily. He's got a full bottle in his hands, and he's in Egypt. So my thought is he's drinking a lot because that suppresses Steven's ability to take over, and that's his way of like stopping, because you're basically kind of like, it's not like Steven taking over the body. We see that when Mark has the body, Steven still has to deal with like the bruises and the cuts and everything. So it could be that drinking dulls the brain's ability to function and makes it so that Steven can't even be able to take over the body because it's not really functioning fully. And that's his way around it for now, is how to suppress Steven.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely see that. And I also feel like watching the relationship between Mark and Steven once again shows that there's a difference in how they view each other. Mark, by Steven views Mark as this horrible person. He's a right git, is the way, I believe, the way he phrased it at one point. But he does not view Mark favorably at all. But the opposite, Mark seems to be protective of Steven. We saw that a little in episode 1, and I'm seeing it here too. When Steven is in the reflection and is paralyzed, you see that it's painful for Mark to see Steven like that. He's looking around. He can't look Steven in the eye when he's talking about the deal he has with Khonshu and why he has to do this. And when Steven is starting to panic inside the statue, Mark is trying to console him. He's saying, it's all right. You're all right. He is very protective over Steven. He cares deeply for Steven, not just as a separate personality, but for who Steven is. So it's very interesting. I look forward to seeing the next episode starting from Mark's point of view.
Yeah, that's the last thing we finally get to see what happens with Steven being in the mirror and Mark in control.
All right, well, I've got plenty more to talk about, but we're trying to keep this short and sweet, relatively short and sweet for everyone. So that's what we have for you today. Thank you everyone for watching. If you liked this content, go ahead and like the video. If you have any comments on things we've discussed or things we failed to discuss, feel free to go ahead and let us know in the comments down below. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be able to follow along with our future discussions and other theory videos that we have. And thanks for watching.